Hello and welcome to Inflection Point Conversations. I'm Michelle Abeda, an art director and 3D artist. In this podcast series, I'll be interviewing experts in the fields of art, architecture, and visualization. Together, we'll take a deep dive into the disruptive topics that have reached an inflection point in our industry. If you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment to like, rate, and subscribe. You can also comment and give feedback. I'd love to reach more people and grow this amazing community. Today, I'm talking with George Proud. George is an architectural designer and visualizer and the CEO of Gendo, an AI tool for architecture. His fascination and excitement with the latest technology, from VR to AR, 3D printing, and parametric modeling, led naturally towards AI in the last 2 years. George co-founded Gendo with Will Jones after realizing that the current AI tools out there are mostly being used for conceptual design work, but can't handle the specificity and control that designers inevitably need. Gendo, which is currently in closed beta, is a web-based AI tool that allows architects and visualizers to create visuals based on their specific designs. George is also an alumni of the Bartlett School of Architecture and is a regular visiting lecturer and critic there. Welcome, George.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming onto the podcast. I'm excited to chat to you and ask you all these questions. So let's get to it. The first one I wanted to ask you, so you started architecture at the Bartlett in UCL in London. What got you interested in the visualization part of architecture?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously an essential tool in an architect's arsenal, and the regular sort of crits and presentations that happened at the Bartlett were, invited the need for good imagery, and there's some high concept projects there in particular, and I think compelling imagery was always much easier to talk around.
Yeah, yeah, definitely visuals. They really help to sell a design, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, planted sections go so far, but I'm sure we've all experienced moments where architects say, "Oh, that's not quite how I imagined it," when they, visit the real thing, which always surprises me, given that's their singular purpose. So, good visuals, AR, VR, all offered opportunities to elevate, the understanding of the building beyond what planted sections can do.
Yeah. Have you always been interested in the latest technology?
Yeah. I mean, I was quite excited by the Oculus when that came out in like 2012 or whenever it was. So got one of the first developer kits for that to play with. Quite rudimentary at the time now, but the use case in architecture seemed self-evident. More so than in gaming or in other fields. So yeah, was always very excited to try and exercise it.
Yeah, did you find that like tutors and stuff at the Bartlett and other people were quite open to trying it out too?
Yeah, broadly, I mean, I don't know that I would have got away with using it as much as I did in other schools, but I remember having presentations where the concept of a VR headset was still an unknown. So people would sort of like get it across their forehead, panic a bit, and then take it off again before really actually engaging. So there's definitely always been a learning curve with using this technology and making sure that architects understand it and utilize it properly.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like definitely needs guidance. I remember whenever I introduced it to people, they were either already on board and excited about VR or just really confused with the concept, and it found it quite hard to be the one to convince them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, some of the modeling and representation at the time wasn't hugely convincing either. So you sort of had the gimmickry of wearing the headset, but if you couldn't convey the project well enough through the representation, it was sometimes a hard sell even then.
Yeah, definitely. Did you find people used to call it gamey as a way of saying they didn't like it? Like it's too much like a video game, which is
Yeah,
I don't see the
yeah.
problem with that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, the overlap between game design and architecture is surprisingly large. Um, but I think if people are quite like style oriented or worry about the aesthetics too much, I think it can be a bit of a blocker.
Yeah. Are you excited about the emergence of AI? So let's talk about AI because that's the hot topic of the moment.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, obviously, wouldn't have founded Gendo if I wasn't keen on it. But I can understand why people see it as a threatening thing as well. I don't think it helps sometimes the sort of tone of conversation that Elon Musk and others have when they discuss it. It's quite doomsaying. I'd like to think we're not quite there with the sort of end of the world AI scenario in terms of the tech. Who knows what people are working on in their private labs, really, but we're in a very nascent stage. It's a raw resource rather than a refined thing. So it's going to take a while for it to reach its sort of true impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I heard a lot of very doomsday conversations at the beginning where people are like, we have 1 year and the robots are going to win, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, but actually things don't really work that way and they don't really turn out that way so much. I mean, so far, let's listen back to this in a year and see what happened.
yeah. You
Um,
never can know.
Let's talk about Gendo. So you co-founded Gendo 6 months ago, um, with Will
Uh,
Jones, and it's a web-based AI tool for architects and visualizers to create visuals. So what made you want to create this? And I don't know, maybe you can introduce the product as much as you can talk about it.
Yeah, so I think when ChatGPT and Midjourney came out, there was a lot of hype and yeah, a bit of the doomsaying as well as it related to creative industries. I think a lot of people thought that creative industries would be among the last sort of bastions of human and AI sort of battling it out, but obviously that's not been the case with the tech as it's emerged. Um, but I think any designer who's tried those things or has a very clear picture of the kind of output they want, whether it's text or image or otherwise, it can be quite hard to actually get the result you want.
Mm.
If you've got a product in mind, you can't really ever describe that to Midjourney in a way that it will give you back an image that's accurate to your sort of design intent. Um, but it seemed possible to me that that is something that could be done if the current models and products weren't doing it. So that was the challenge really. Like VR and AR, the use case in architecture and visualization seemed obvious, but the tools just hadn't been built yet. So yeah, we took the chance to try and plug that gap.
Yeah, and can you describe it? Can you describe the product a little bit to me? I know it's in closed beta, so it's you can't show anything at the moment, but what can you
Yeah,
tell me
so
about it?
it's a browser-based product because anyone who's rendered or used rendering software before knows that the hardware required is typically quite high-end and expensive, and then you also have the headaches of software compatibility, etc. So keeping it in the cloud abstracts away all of those problems for users and puts it more in our control, so we can sort of be constantly updating it without having to worry the user with it. Um, and the idea is that you can take any sort of architectural image input, just as a JPEG or PNG, put it into the platform and carry that all the way through to a sort of fully realized, occupied, material lit, textured image, sidestepping all of the traditional process in doing so. Um, so yeah, that's the ambition. And yeah, as you said, it's in closed beta now. We've got uh, agreements with some big firms like KPF and Zaha did, who are testing it with us and giving us feedback, as well as a number of smaller firms and visualization studios. So we're testing it hard over the next month or so to really refine the product and make sure that it's something that's truly useful rather than the sort of first line gimmick.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've tried a few of the tools out there and I know what you mean. I mean especially I heard, that Midjourney was made not to be art directed um in the same way that, they designed that um not to be able to be specific about what you wanted, which then for architecture it does leave it in the conceptual range. And um I'm definitely, I tried it out a little bit and it's really impressive what I've seen so far. So I'm excited to see it develop. So have you always wanted to start your own business? What gave you the urge to go forward with that?
Yeah, so before Gendo, I had a visualization practice as well, just me and a few freelancers occasionally. And that was fun. Like we did lots of projects, a lot of yeah, augmented and virtual reality things for architects, all very enjoyable and was going fine. But I wanted to just be a bit more ambitious with the scale of the sort of project, and also to get a little deeper into the tech rather than just using it, building it more specifically. So I think you know, things like Unreal and Unity are broad platforms. You know, they service a lot of people, and I think again in a similar vein, they're not always the most straightforward or useful inherently for architectural purposes. So I think it was an opportunity to uh, you know, do that myself.
Yeah. And then the same thing with Gendo, I guess. Like you wanted to sort of solve this problem where you couldn't find someone was doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some friends had done the startup thing before, and it always seemed quite exciting and interesting, if a little risky at points.
Yeah.
But I thought, you know, now was the time. It would only get harder to do it later, so you know, we'll give it a bloody good go and see what happens.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about your experience with that. Since you've gone sort of you dived in, head first and you've got be go, you're developing it full time, and you have employees and things like how's that been? Like how was it at the beginning?
Yeah, so I joined a like tech incubator called Entrepreneur First, which is unique in a way compared to some because they bring like a cohort of people together who they think are capable and skilled, but don't necessarily have an idea yet. And they put us all in a room for 3 months and left us to it to see what we would come up with. So we did that, and Gendo was born there really. We exited the program. We didn't get funding from them initially, but we at that point had had really good feedback from a bunch of firms that we were working with at that point, Foster's and Heatherwick and some visualization firms. So, you know, we had enough evidence to keep going. At that point, we were just generating cutouts of people, so very niche, but
Mm,
sort of proved all of the tech and the platform and sort of the, you know, the infrastructure for what Gendo has become now. And we then sort of fell into fundraising in truth, speaking to angel investors and typical venture capital funds, which was a difficult few months. Obviously, we were doing all of this at cost at the time. And yeah, we were lucky enough to secure some funding in the end. And we
mm,
have some amazing angel investors, ex VP of design, global design at WeWork,
hmm.
a VP at 11 Labs, an AI voice company, co-founder of Arc Daily as well, and yeah, the venture capital fund. So some amazing support, both in terms of the commercial and the architectural technical and the AI technical and all of the above. So it's been an amazing experience so far, but much more to do.
Yeah, and was the experience of trying to raise the capital, I mean, was that something that you found natural that you'd done before, or because that sounds something that's quite daunting to me, not having come from that kind of background, entrepreneurial background at all.
No, me neither. It was a steep learning curve for sure. We spoke to many people before we secured the funding, and you know, there's rounds and rounds of interviews and prep and presentations and data to be collected. Obviously, they're quite diligent in their process. Um, so it was our first time as well. So you know, I think we were lucky to come across some of our angel investors quite early who were very supportive and helped us sort of refine our presentation and product at that point to pitch it better, which obviously, you know, worked out in the end, but it was quite alien at the time.
Yeah. And so you were saying that was it just you and your co-founder who went to this incubator? So you knew you wanted to make something and you didn't know exactly what yet. That's how you started? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. My co-founder Will is an amazing software developer, so technical background, having worked in some startups before as an employee, similar sort of ambition to do something larger. But he's quite a creative guy. Has had built some generative AI things before it was cool.
Oh,
So I've had
wow.
some appreciation for it in some of the older sort of GANs models, ways of doing things. Um, and I think appreciated architecture in his personal life. He says he considered doing the training, but he opted for the software in the end. So
Yeah.
it's quite a natural pairing in terms of interests, and then I think a very complementary skill set between us to sort of cover a lot of ground in the early days, at least,
Yeah.
quickly.
And did you know each other before?
No, no, no. So I've known Will for maybe a couple of weeks longer than Gendo has been a thing, really.
Wow.
Yes, it's also an interesting experience. It's the main reason startups fail is because co-founders fall out. So investors are keen to understand that you're a functional working unit, and they can de-risk that as a possibility. So it's certainly a relationship to be cared for.
Yeah, that seems smart. So, how has the feedback been so far from the people who've been testing out Gendo in beta, as much as you can tell me?
Yeah, no, it's been good. I mean, people have been returning to use it, so it's not the case that they've logged in and realised this is of no use to them, which has been, great to see. We've been building sort of quietly for a while, so it's validating to see people using it in the way that we anticipated. I mean, I worked, as you said, in architecture visualization for a while, so I understand. The pains and problems of producing images and managing the sort of client designer relationship. So I think we had a good basis to build from, but obviously that's all just my opinion and experience that needs to be tested across the board with users, because I think we're trying to make it as easy as possible for designers themselves to be the ones to make images rather than necessitating specialists every time. Um, so, it's all about making the interface as easy to use as possible and abstracting away the technical parts of utilizing AI. And I think so far that's also worked. And, the ability to carry your design intent through iterations of images has worked as far as we can see so far. So time will tell, but it's looking promising as things have been going.
Yeah. Who do you view who do you imagine the user to be? Is it architects or is it visualizers?
Yeah, I think architects more so. I mean, I think it's inevitable that there will always be the sort of expert visualizers who produce like the most beautifully composed and put together images. I think that will be incredibly hard to replicate with AI. But obviously, when you're working on a design project, the sort of visualizer images are the sort of sprinkle on top of what is otherwise a long design process where the architects do produce images themselves, or there are quick in-house images made, and it should be the case that is much easier and faster and under the control of the architect as well, because it can be difficult to convey what you want in an image. That conversation between a visualizer and architect can be a little fraught sometimes when something's been misunderstood. Um, so being able to control that yourself in a matter of minutes rather than hours or days, I think should be super helpful.
Yeah. Do you think it's like the everyday architect will be using this tool or tools like this just a little bit throughout the day, or do you think you will end up having architectural experts, which is sort of how visualization stuff in the first place, right? You had some people who just got good at this and started doing this a lot. It'll be like a different kind of visualization.
Yeah. I think inevitably there will always be those people who are more interested in it, and to get that sort of top end marketing image will require a greater deal of attention to detail, and I don't think at the moment, at least, that the models are capable of that. The top end of image production. So I think it will be primarily architects, but I think visualizers inevitably will end up making use of architectural tools, but it will be for assets that they then use in perhaps more traditional rendering workflows. So there's plenty of opportunity there still for them, but that's obviously a much more niche and particular group of people to serve.
Yeah. What do you hope for AI to be able to do in the near future?
Yeah, I think it should be empowering for people to do their jobs better. I mean, an interesting study I saw recently was about the AlphaGo AI and what happened since AlphaGo has become accessible, and the quality of Go play is that it's on average people play better than they did before. They make fewer
Mhm.
mistakes
What's
and
AlphaGo? Can you just explain that?
oh yes, sorry. AlphaGo is Google's DeepMind sort of AI, which was built to play the board game Go,
Mm.
which is sort of infinitely more complicated than chess. Chess being an earlier AI model. I think they said that there are more positions on a Go board than there are atoms in the universe. So it's like
Right.
an incredibly complicated thing to get an AI to play. Because with chess, there are lots of variations, but they're more knowable, and you can have sort of a decision tree process of like, oh well, the board looks like this, therefore my moves are XYZ. Whereas
Mm.
in Go, because there are so many more permutations, you can't really work like them. So they
Mm.
had to teach it how to play Go itself rather than just sort of check against an existing database. So they trained this AI to play the game, and they had it play against like a world-class player who was confident that he'd win at the time, but in the end he lost 4-1. And there was one particular move in there, which was move 37, where the AI made a move which was like a 1 in 10,000 chance of playing this move, so very obscure and not one that is like, I guess the word culturally appropriate in the game of Go. There's a culture about how you think about and how you play it, so that human players wouldn't have even considered that an option to have played, but the AI did it. So that challenged the sort of understanding of how Go was played, and then the ability to practice against AI to learn the game of Go has raised the bar in terms of the quality of play for human players. And I think that that will be the case in all other fields as well, that it's going to make architecture and architecture visualization a higher standard and increase our understanding of it beyond what's possible now. And I think it's going to be about how we leverage AI in the best way possible to do that, rather than to try and replace designers in that process, as something to give them superpowers instead.
Yeah, that's a really interesting analogy, actually. Um, people maybe don't necessarily think, or there's like something that is not culturally the way to think about a certain problem. For example, AI encouraging people to think differently than what we normally do. I guess it's like going outside of norms and things. If that's the kind of thing you mean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any reservations or hesitations about AI and what it could allow?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're in a year of lots of elections globally, and deepfakes are a huge cause of concern. I think BBC have just introduced a new way of authenticating information and images on their website. There's obviously been all of this stuff around Kate Middleton's photoshopping of her image in the news recently, which I think a couple of years ago wouldn't have got anywhere near as much attention as it does now. But yeah, the ability to falsify information believably is going to be hugely impactful. I mean, I saw a video where they had Donald Trump, Biden, and Obama teaching people about sine waves in maths for like a GCSE level education video, which was quite a benign use case, but like perfectly executed. Like you would not have known that it wasn't real.
Wow.
So it's just bananas. I think uh, it's going to be quite challenging in lots of ways for sure.
Yeah. In terms of Gendo and other image making software or like tools for, let's say, architects and visualizers, what would you say to people who are concerned about confidentiality? I mean, most studios that I've worked at, the images that we're working on, are projects we're working on, are highly confidential. And the barrier to using an AI tool at the moment is that once you upload an image, it's with someone else. Oh.
Yeah, so that's certainly something we've spoken to a number of our beta users about in detail, because yeah, understandably, you've got NDAs and confidential projects, and it can't be the case that they're just willy-nilly flying around in data sets, etc. I think people have been a little lax perhaps in reading terms and conditions of some of the AI platforms out there, because they certainly keep and will utilize the data provided. Because to their mind it will improve their product and service, but obviously if it's a confidential one, you wouldn't want them to be doing that. I think as well the data sort of protection rules differ depending on what region things are in. So obviously America's have a different set of rules for data regulation, and some practices have been wise enough to check where the servers are stashed and what that means for their data. So have chosen not to use some platforms for that reason alone. We've tried to keep everything closed. Like we don't operate like Midjourney in that there's no public aspect to our platform. The work is kept inside of your own account, so it's not possible for someone else to see what you're working on. And at the end of the beta, we'll be wiping a bunch of data, so that there'll be none of sensitive project information left on there when we're done. We're not looking to train on the data people provide for all of these reasons, more just to understand how our product is functioning. So that moves into sort of reinforcement learning in AI. So if you see that somewhere, I would perhaps double check what that means in terms of the offering of the platform and how they use your data.
Right. So the hope for Gendo would be that, once the beta's finished, it would be a closed system so that, let's say, a company or studio who's using it, their images don't get input anywhere else, and so they can remain confidential. Is that the point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think we'd like to have some level of collaborative functions, and I think we may include some sort of on-platform NDAs. So if you are sharing screen with someone, you could be confident that they had signed the appropriate paperwork, so you could be a bit more free with that. I think like the enterprise level agreements will necessitate all of this sort of structure in there to make sure that everyone's confident that their information is stored properly and removed properly as required. Not everyone will need that, so I think it will be sort of an optional thing, but yeah, certainly something we're conscious of.
Yeah. So basically, read the terms and conditions really well.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I think everyone's got very excited at the beginning, and I mean, I think this is probably true of everything. It's like true of Google. It's true of, I remember the first time I realized that, Facebook said that once you upload an image to Facebook, it belongs to Facebook. I was so surprised by that, and that was years ago. Now I feel like I'm not surprised by any of it. Like I just feel like I don't own any of my things, but I also don't, this personal work, it isn't really confidential work, but if I work for a company, it's like very different.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, Reddit recently sold all of their data to Google for some crazy amount of money, but I think that probably put a lot of Reddit users off for all the same reasons, But yes, it's a difficult area to navigate for sure.
Yeah. We touched on this a little bit before, but I wanted to ask you, what do you see the role of an architectural visualizer now and in the near future with tools like this?
Yeah, I think I sort of alluded to it, but I think like the very top end of visualizers, I think they will inevitably carry on, because I think sometimes people just don't have the headspace to produce images, or let alone the time. Um, and I think the super high quality work will always remain. I think it will be more concerning for people who specialize in quick turnaround and not necessarily the highest quality, because I think that's the easiest thing to replicate. But I would encourage visualizers to get stuck in with AI tools. It's the people using them that will beat you, not the AI itself. So yeah, I think it's on everyone to try and keep up with the technology and make sure that they're using it as effectively as they can.
Yeah. So your
Yeah,
advice, your advice for architectural visualizers would also be keep up with the latest technology.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the best characterization for AI I've heard so far is that it's more like 100 really dumb people rather than one really smart one. And I think that speaks to needing to give very clear direction and control, and having to have an expert at the wheel to drive it, because the AI isn't going to know all of the intricate details and manage the process, properly. So it's more a brute force solution in parts. But yes, certainly, as always, I guess, always best to keep up with the tech rather than be left behind.
Yeah. I love that. I love that saying. I'm glad you reminded me of it. AI is like 100 dumb people rather than one really smart one.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
just learn how to talk to 100 dumb people.
yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's a good place to wrap it up. Thank you so much, George. Really excited to see what happens, with gender at the next phase. And definitely excited to try it out some more. Good luck. Good luck with this tool. And thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.